90 million. That was the average number of people worldwide that watched a tennis match in an era when television sets were only owned by the elites with zero connection to the internet. But it wasn't just about the numbers. It was the reason behind this unprecedented attention that made it truly extraordinary. Ladies and gentlemen, Battle of the Sexes. 4 times that male and female players faced off to prove who actually was the boss of the tennis world. Now, if you've never heard of the Battle of the Sexes, then you're probably not as in love with tennis as you think you are, because it is easily the most dramatic event in tennis history. But hey, we don't have to gatekeep the spicy side of tennis, so we'll let you in on this one. You see, in the early years of tennis, female players faced significant discrimination and challenges in comparison to their male counterparts. And by significant discrimination, I mean they had fewer chances to compete, got less prize money, and media coverage that was sparser than a deserted tennis court. It was as if the tennis world thought women were more interested in sipping tea than smashing winners. And on top of that, women had to navigate very strict rules that made their on-court attire look like something out of a Victorian tea party. Let's just say the dress regulations limited their freedom of movement and expression on the court. Since the time of the first official women's tennis tournament, which took place in 1884, this was the reality of women's tennis for over a century. That is, until the 70s, when female tennis players started to struggle for gender equality in sports with one voice. And that voice was Billie Jean King. Just like her name, King was literally the king of women's tennis during her time. She wasn't just a terrific player, she was also very influential. I mean, what else can you say about a person that took on the battle of advocating for equal opportunities and recognition of women in the sport? She was also one of the core founding members of the Women's Tennis Association, aka the WTA, in 1973. In fact, you could think of her as the Serena Williams of her time, except Billie had a total of 39 Grand Slam titles to her name, including 12 in singles, 16 in women's doubles, and 11 in mixed doubles. King was a hero. But you see, the thing with every hero story is that it is definitely not complete without a villain. And in this story, the villain was none other than 55-year-old Bobby Riggs. Okay, well, maybe calling him a villain is going over the top a little. But hey, that's what you get for being a self-proclaimed male chauvinist. That was exactly what Bobby was. He was downright ancient. He would go on and on about how men were inherently superior to women in terms of athletic ability and that women were incapable of competing at the same level as men. But here's the thing about Riggs. He was a notorious hustler. This guy wasn't just satisfied with the prize money that he got from playing tennis. So, to make a little extra dough, he placed bets on himself to do some of the most mind-blowing things. Things like winning a tennis match with a frying pan instead of a tennis racket. One time, he even bet on himself to win the 1939 Wimbledon singles, doubles, and mixed doubles events all in the same year. And guess what? He bagged all 3 of them. With this, 2 things were clear. Number 1, Riggs was arguably one of the best players of his time. And number 2, the American would do almost anything to get the bag. So, when he noticed the publicity that Billie generated from the women's liberation movement in 1973, he decided to capitalize on it. Now, Riggs's plan was simple. Challenge King to a match, since she believed that women are good enough to be treated as equals with men in tennis. Leave her in the dust, and dance all the way to the bank to cash the $10,000 prize money. Easy peasy. So, Bobby came out of retirement and challenged Billie to a 3-set match in the spring of 1973. Now, at first, Billie rejected the challenge because she wasn't about to stroke Riggs's ego. Plus, she didn't think it gave women's tennis any benefit. But eventually, she agreed. And with that, the biggest match in tennis history was born. September 20th, 1973, at the Astrodome Houston in Texas. It wasn't just Bobby Riggs versus Billie King. It was man versus woman in the tennis world. A battle that had everything it took to make or break the future of women's tennis in front of 30,472 spectators and over 90 million TV viewers worldwide. Now get this, even after 50 decades, no other match comes close to being as epic and dramatic. King was lifted onto the court in an Egyptian lifter, hauled by 4 shirtless men. Riggs entered in a rickshaw carried by 6 showgirls. But that wasn't all. They both exchanged gifts right before the match started. King received a giant sugar daddy lollipop, while Riggs was given a live baby pig. Classic. Now, before the match, Riggs had done a lot of boasting about how he was going to trash King on any court. He also openly mocked the idea that women and men should be treated as equals, because he thought that he could bring back the Stone Age and prove that women couldn't hold a candle to men on the court. So a lot of folks knew that Bobby had a record for winning bets, so they already knew what the outcome of the match would be. King, on the other hand, had other plans. Rather than approach the net as usual, 27-year-old Billy stayed at the baseline and made Riggs do all the running. After about 2 hours of pushing Riggs around the court, Billy showed the old man that his chauvinistic bluster was as useful as a tennis racket made of cheese. The final score? By the end of the match, Billy came out victorious with a scoreline of 6-4, 6-3, 6-3. Who's the boss now, Riggs? That's right, not you! The impact of that match was like a giant tennis ball crashing through the glass ceiling of gender equality. King's victory wasn't just a win for her, but a victory for all women who were told they couldn't measure up. Without a doubt, this is the best gender face-off in the entire history of tennis. But it certainly wasn't the first. You see, when Riggs first challenged King, she refused his offer, so he was kinda disappointed because he thought it would be satisfying to put her in her place. But hey, he had $10,000 to cash out, so he still had to look somewhere else. And by somewhere else, how does a 24 Grand Slam tennis champion sound? That champion was Margaret Court. At the time, Court was in the midst of her 7th straight year of being the #1 ranked female player in the world. Unlike King, Court couldn't care about fighting for women's rights. She just had her eyes on the paycheck. And let's cut her some slack here, folks. $10,000 is a lot of money, especially in the 70s. Riggs convinced Margaret Court to face him on Mother's Day of that year, and when they finally met on May 13th, the match was over in under an hour. Riggs demoralized Court with a scoreline of 6-2, 6-1. It was so bad that it was nicknamed the Mother's Day Massacre, because Margaret was literally left in the dust. After this win, Bobby put on his full misogynistic armor and was raging like a bull on crack. He couldn't go a month without talking about how women play about 25% as good as men. In his words, women belong in the bedroom and the kitchen, in that order. Thank God Billy put him in his place. Anyways, fast forward 19 years later, and the third man versus woman tennis match was played in 1992 between Jimmy Connors and Martina Navratilova. But this time, it was named Battle of Champions. Just like Billy, Martina originally refused to participate in a man versus woman match against Ilie Nastase and John McEnroe, but she eventually agreed to play against Connors. But unlike the Battle of the Sexes, the Battle of Champions was not a political event. It was all about money and entertainment, and it wasn't even being broadcast on national television. Each player was paid $500,000 to compete, and to top it off, the winner gets to walk away with $1 million. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, maybe not for Connors, because the rules were made in favor of Martina. She had 2 regular serves. Jimmy, on the other hand, had just 1. And to top it all off, Martina had a wider return field, as Jimmy's part of the court was increased for half the width of each doubles alley. Anyways, the match ended after an hour and 28 minutes, with Jimmy beating Navratilova by a scoreline of 7-5, 6-2. He literally took her to school. But at least she accepted the defeat without throwing a fit. I wish we could say the same thing for the Williams sisters. Now, you might not know who Brosh is, and to be fair, he didn't make it past the top 30 in his entire career, so I guess that would be kind of understandable. I mean, he looks more like a mad scientist than a tennis pro, if we're being honest. Towards the end of his career in 1998, Brosh was ranked 203rd in the world, and at the same time, the tennis world was buzzing with the rise of the Williams sisters. Yeah, they were good. So good that it started to get to their heads. But you see, the thing with pride is that it always comes just before a fall. The Williams sisters began to boast about how they could defeat any man ranked outside the top 200. Since Brosh happened to fit the bill, he accepted their challenge and honesty. The rest is history. He took Serena Williams down with a scoreline of 6-1 and beat Venus Williams 6-2. And according to Brosh, he played like a 600 ranked player. So the sisters wouldn't even stand a chance against a 500 ranked player. Now, it's somewhat difficult to answer the woman versus man debate in the world of tennis, because time and time again, these face-offs have proved that though women are extremely good at the sport, male players have a higher tendency to win, unless of course the woman in question is Billie Jean King. So there you have it, folks. Do you think we need more man versus woman contests in tennis? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to learn more interesting things about your favorite tennis players.